All right, a nice piece of work. Welcome, everybody. I'm Neil Cavuto, and you are watching Your World. And a very solid jobs report in the month of April. 211,000 of them added, and that was more than thought. What's more is we had some stunning news on the unemployment front. We're going to get into that with Dagan McDowell right now. Dagan, first of all, you're going on about 20 straight hours on the air, so this should be interesting. Tell us what happened.
And I love my job, and I love you, so I'm not going to foul this up. How about that? Neil, we should point out that the S&P 500, a broad measure of the stock market, and the NASDAQ composite just closing at new record highs. So investors found something to like in this jobs report. You saw it on the screen there, a very healthy 211,000 jobs created in the month of April. Economists were expecting a much lower number than that. And the unemployment rate falling to a 10-year low of 4.4%. So a robust jobs report across the board. There were revisions to the months of February and March for a net loss of 6,000 jobs. Remember, March was a weak month for job creation. Nevertheless, monthly payroll growth has averaged 185,000 jobs so far this year, nearly matching the pace that we saw in 2016. Now, if there was one weak spot in this jobs report today, it's how much people are earning. Our average hourly earnings only growing at 2.5% from a year ago. That pace slowing significantly from December, and that's one of the things that's really created a malaise in this country among workers. Those who do have jobs is that they aren't earning that much more money. So we'll see if that gets these lawmakers down in Washington off their you-know-whats and gets that tax cut bill done and also gets health care reform pushed through.
Is there any doubt that maybe the report might have complicated things in this way, that the need for sort of a tax break might have lessened a little bit if the economy's chugging along as well as it appears to be?
You're right about that it reduces the urgency, particularly with this tax reform bill. But I do point to that wage growth number, which is weak. And there were healthy gains across the board in a lot of these industries. A broad range of industries saw job growth: leisure and hospitality, professional and business services, and healthcare, just to name a few of them. But there isn't that. This isn't the kind of jobs report on the weak side that would really light a fire under people in D.C.
You know, not to digress, but one of the funniest lines I heard out of you this week was with this new caffeinated muffin or something like that.
Bagel.
The bagel, right? And that you could take them and a couple of Red Bulls and you'd still be able to sleep no problem.
Yes, I'll be napping under the desk after I say goodbye to you.
All right. Thank you, kiddo. Great job as always. Oh, man, is she funny. All right. But nothing funny about those tax cuts. They are coming and they are a serious undertaking here. But former presidential candidate Herman Cain says that it's no reason for Democrats or those not too keen on him to slough them off, saying that we don't need him. You say, Herman, we do, right?
Yes, we do. Did you hear me cheering while you were interviewing Dagan? I am thrilled. And what it indicates is that there is a positive tone from the top since Trump has been president that's filtering down through businesses who are saying, I have confidence that the rules aren't going to change. So they're starting to expand and they're starting to create new jobs. And so I'm thrilled with that, but it doesn't surprise me, and I believe that it is going to continue.
You know, you're right by that memorable image of Ronald Reagan, and I know you espouse a lot of his conservative principles, and there's a raging debate within the Republican Party, I mean, whether those tax cuts have to be paid for, or they be revenue neutral, and then there's static accounting versus dynamic accounting. I don't want to get you in my nerdy, boring world. You're far too electrifying. But do you think that that could be a problem for Republicans, that they could torpedo this?
No. The reason that it was only 211,000 jobs is because the economy has been growing on average of about 2% GDP growth for the last 8 years. That's why it's as low as it is. I believe business people and stock market investors believe that it can be greater than that when you start getting a GDP growth greater than that, around 3.5% to 4%. I don't think it's going to be a problem for the business community. It may be an excuse that some some Democrats and liberals use to say, well, we don't need to cut taxes that much. No, the reason we need to cut taxes as much as President Trump is proposing is so we can get this economy growing at a rate it can afford, which is 3.5% to 4%. That's where we need
Could
to
you
be.
imagine?
And
I mean,
job growth is going to be even more.
You hit on something very profound here, that it seems weak. It seems like 3% is weak, but if we're averaging under 2% now, that would be a 50% pickup in economic activity if we were to get to that minimal level. But it seems like every thinking economist says can't be done. It's a leap of faith. We used to do that. So why are we so sure? That is the economists and brainiacs and mainstream media types to say we can't.
Neil, I was on your show in the early 1990s when we were doing GDP growth of 4% plus. I know it can happen, and all of the economists who saying, well, we can't do that for whatever reason, they are simply wrong. You and I have lived through this. You and I have lived
Don't make
through
me sound
robust.
as old as you. Now be careful here. But
Well,
I know
let's
what
just
you're
say
saying.
let's just say you're my younger brother, but you're not that younger, okay?
I hear you.
We know that this economy can do better. That's what I'm excited about. We know it can do better. And the proposal that President Trump has put on the table, all Congress has to do is to pass it. Yeah, they're going to screw around with it. Yeah, they're going to try to tweak it. It's bold. And this is the first time we've had a bold tax proposal with someone in the White House who's going to take the leadership. When the fair tax, the flat tax, and 999 were proposed, we didn't have the leader in the White House. We have a unique opportunity, Republicans, to pass something bold because we have the guy in the White House who is willing to lead the charge on a bold tax plan, and I love it.
All right. I consider you the Yoda of these matters. My much older friend, Herman Cain. Thank you very, very much. We won't get into the nuances of exact ages here.
You're welcome, my younger brother.
There we go. Fine. Let's take a look at the corner of Wall and Broad, shall we, today, and see what we did. The Dow leaping up over 21,000. It snuck through there. The S&P and I believe the NASDAQ both at record levels today. Am I right, guys? I think I am. So we had a nice appreciable run up here. A lot of that has to do with the timing of all of this going just to play here. The markets are very, very confident we're going to get tax cuts, very, very confident we're going to get something done on the healthcare front, and very, very confident that Republicans don't screw it up. That's why they were buying. Meanwhile, Nancy Pelosi has no problem calling the Republican health care bill Trump care. But you remember when she had a problem with Obamacare? After this.
Indeed, inequality and inhumanity is exactly what Trump Care has in store. From the beginning, Trump Care was a moral monstrosity that will devastate seniors, children, and hardworking Americans. But I reject the wrong priorities in Trump Care.
All right, God forbid, Trump Care, whatever she wants to call it, turns out to be a roaring success. There was a time when she had a lot of problems calling the Affordable Care Act Obamacare. Let's go back in time.
In the current environment in a swing district, is Obamacare a winner or a loser politically?
Well, you have to ask the member, but I believe that it's a winner. And by the way, it's called the Affordable Care Act. Affordable.
Not Obama. Karl Rove, the former deputy chief of staff for President George W. Bush. That used to be a very prickly issue with her, naming that health act after the last president. Not so this one with this president. What do you think of that?
Well, first of all, I loved your little thing like this.
Thank you very much.
Way back
like
machine
a Wayne's
thing.
World. Yeah, go
Wayne's
ahead.
World.
Right.
But is it me, or was she trying to sort of affordable? Listen to my words. You are under my command. Affordable. I mean, look, her comments yesterday were way over the top, and other Democrats have joined in making these wild accusations. Yeah, they didn't want Obama's name associated with it when it was was unpopular, they hope that they can associate it with Donald Trump and make it unpopular. And the way that they're going about doing it is saying things that are fundamentally, completely, and totally dishonest. Some would say even lies about what this bill does.
All right, but did they go even further than that, Carl, when they started saying, the millions who are going to die?
Yeah, well, I saw that that several members of Congress did, and Terry McAuliffe, the governor of Virginia. Think about this: he occupies a position once held by Thomas Jefferson and James Monroe, who went on to be presidents of the United States. And he said people will die as a result of this law. Well, they make the accusation, but back it up, you demagogue. I mean, this bill will not lead to the death of millions or thousands or hundreds of thousands, as has been alleged. This is an improvement on a broken system that these people are responsible for, that they got by lying to the American people. They said it's going to cover every single American. It's going to, if you like your plan, you can keep your plan. Like you, doc, keep your doc. Your premiums are going to go down $2,500 per person. Not going to add a dime to the deficit. All those things turned out to be untrue, and the law is failing in front of our eyes. And the response of this people is to say, let's just keep putting people in a place where they can't get adequate access to adequate health care coverage, and with a law that's broken.
You're great at history, so maybe you can help me out with this. If this is reputed, Republicans do get a repeal and replace effort to their liking. Have we ever had any gargantuan government program reversed like that years later? Now, the close I could think is welfare, changing it to welfare to work, and what Ronald Reagan was able to do with Newt Gingrich. But that's the closest I could come up with of anything of this magnitude. What do you think?
Yeah, the bipartisan reform of welfare that happened in 1994 with Newt Gingrich and Bill Clinton is really one of those rare and remarkable moments. You can maybe make the argument that the bipartisan agreement to reduce our dependency on protective tariffs is another example of a big government program that was reversed, but it doesn't happen often. And let's be clear about this. If the Republicans are able to get this done, and that's a big if, because this is a very complicated measure, and there's going to be a lot of differences in what the Senate does. There's going to be a conference committee that's going to try and reconcile it, and there's going to be another pair of difficult votes in the House and Senate. Even if the Senate's able to come up with its own bill, the effects of that bill are going to take a while to bake in. Yeah. And so this is not going to be necessarily a huge political winner for the Republicans in 2018, but if they don't do it, it's a huge political loser.
What I did notice is that even in the case of the Obamacare, in the first vote and then even in the second vote when it became law, there but by 3 or 4 different Democrats, because not a single Republican voted for it, it could have gone down to defeat.
Oh, yeah. We forget that 30 Democrats voted against it on final passage in the House, and that was with a very popular president and a 257 vote margin for the Democrats in the House, and they lost 30 of them and barely won it. So, yeah, this dealing with health care, which is 1/6 of the economy, is always complicated because it's such a big issue. It's also further complicated by the fact that it's a very personal issue. What do we worry about? We worry about whether we're able to provide for our kids, whether they're going to get a good education, whether our family's going to enjoy good health. So we're touching one of the most important and personal items that a family thinks about around the kitchen table.
I was thinking when you would appear here when Nancy Pelosi with the affordable comment, we are at this stage now where they're thinking about toppling this whole thing, because it wasn't affordable. But leaving that aside, when the vote was done yesterday, Democrats broke into song, more or less saying, well, that's it. You guys are done. I don't know if you've seen it. Do we have listen to this.
Sanctions with respect to transactions related to North Korea and for other purposes.
Hey, goodbye. In other words, that they just kissed their career and majority goodbye. What did you think of that?
First of all, I thought it was demeaning and silly and made us look like some third world dictatorship in Latin America with, sort of children on the floor of the Congress of, the Republic of, Equatorial South America. I mean, it was ridiculous. I mean, this is a place that is the heart of our democracy, and to treat it like that, I thought was disrespectful to the institution that these people serve in.
All right. We are done with Carl's World. Carl's World World. Okay. Karl Rove, thank you. Very good. I thought mine was
I'm going to the Wayback Machine.
Yeah,
I'm getting in the
mine are
Wayback
a little
Machine.
bit more theatrical. All right, Karl Rove, thank you very, very much. In the meantime, we are waiting to hear from Secretary of State Rex Tillerson. He's going to be making some remarks in the State Department. He raised some eyebrows talking about Russia and Iran and all this stuff about safe zones in Syria, but that our relations have deteriorated to the point that they're the worst since the Cold War. What's more, he said his boss, the president, agrees. The Secretary of State after this. All right, the scene at the State Department right now. Secretary of State Tillerson is expected to make some remarks at the State Department. He is also expected maybe to touch on what he had said yesterday about relationships with Russia right now, the coldest they've been since the Cold War. So for all of those who thought whatever meddling the Russians might have done in the election on behalf of Donald Trump and that things would be cozy or the president would be in Vladimir Putin's hip pocket, indications are from the Secretary of State and from his boss, the president himself, far from the case. Virginia Republican Congressman, former Navy SEAL Scott Taylor joining us now. Sir, good to have you.
Neil, great to be with you.
It does seem, and I guess the Secretary of State might, among other celebratory events at this award ceremony, might be touching on other things, but he is echoing again something that's been pretty obvious of late, that we have a pretty rocky relationship with Russia right now. Russian jets chased off the coast of Alaska, to say nothing of this new plan that they have to keep U.S. planes out of multiple no-fly zones over Syria. What's going on here?
Well, Neil, let me first say we lost a great man last night in Somalia, and I just want to give thoughts and prayers out to his family, his friends, and his teammates. But that being said, when you talked about Russia, the relationship is rocky, of course, and it's been rocky for years now. And I think they're sort of testing this new administration and feeling it out to see how far they can get away with and can't get away with. Clearly, they filled some vacuums from the last administration, and I think it's going to be tense in certain areas with Russia until we have a feeling out process and we show strength and show how far they can and cannot go.
Now, obviously, the two talk this week, the president and Vladimir Putin on the phone. They look forward to meeting each other this summer, presumably at that NATO conference. But are you getting a sense now that it is going to be icy and that whatever overtures that had been planned are at least delayed?
Well, let me also say that there are some things that we agree on with Russia, that we need to collaborate with Russia around the world and in the Middle East right now, of course, because they filled some vacuums. But there also are diverging interests as well too. It is important that we talk to them, especially when you look at Syria and making sure that we deconflict with certain things, because that's a small sandbox with a lot of great powers playing in there, and there's potential for increased conflict. So, I think that there has to be continuing conversations with Russia on many different topics. We want to make sure that we don't end up in conflict with them as well. But at the same time, we have to be prepared in case we have to be, and we have to be prepared to show strength and make sure that they don't go farther than we want them to, or in our interest in places like Ukraine or Syria.
You mentioned Syria at the end there, and I do want to touch again on these multiple no-fly zones that the Russians have cooked up with the Iranians and others, and that we should not interfere in those zones. So we obviously would not honor that. What happens when one of our planes fly into that?
Well, again, it's very important that there's deconfliction with these great powers, because, again, you have Iran, you have Turkey, you have Russia, you have Israel, you have us playing in that small sandbox. I don't think that we'll honor it. I'm hopeful that this conflict, whether it's a political military solution in Syria, subsides, because obviously the tragedies and horror that's quite frankly happening there. But at the same time, I remain skeptical, as I was with other ceasefires that Russia tried to declare, as I am skeptical with the removing of chemical weapons. Obviously, I do think that there's some political issues here to try to stop the United States from having the ability to respond if they have to. As you said, I don't think they will honor it, but at the same time, we certainly have to continue to have dialogue dialogue with these countries.
Wasn't that long ago that the Secretary of State held out the possibility, Congressman, that maybe that agreement we have with Iran, that they're not honoring it, that we might just rip it up. I'm paraphrasing here. But that could do harm, critics have been saying globally, that the United States can't be trusted on these international agreements, even though we might have very legitimate cause in the case that Iran couldn't be trusted honoring this one. But what do you think the fallout would be if we said of that nuclear agreement that it's null and void?
Well, I'm certainly on record and very overtly saying that I think it was a bad deal. I think it just solidifies their path to nuclear weapons in the future. But when you have these international agreements, that has to go through the Senate. The Senate has to see those, and these are treaties. They're not just an agreement, in my opinion, that the executive branch should just unilaterally make. So I think that you have to have the rest of the government involved in these as well. These international agreements. I do not like the deal. A lot of others don't, obviously, either. And and there are reports that Iran has breached the deal, if you will, domestically in their country. They'll say that we did,
right,
but
right.
So I'm not. I'm skeptical of the deal. I'm not sure it lasts.
But your distinction here, and it's a good one, is that since this never went through the normal procedures, like the Senate in this case, it might not be an agreement at all.
It's not a treaty. That's for certain, and I believe it should be something like this. It should be.
All right, Congressman, thank you.
Thank you, Neil.
In the meantime, former Obama security advisor Susan Rice refusing to testify Monday on the unmasking of Trump campaign officials and the role that the Russians might or might not have played. She is free to send her regrets. Is she free to ignore the people who say they want to hear from her? After this. All right, the France election is this weekend, and Greenpeace using the opportunity for an Eiffel Tower protest against Marine Le Pen. Why that could just be for starters. Get ready.
The investment world is full of complex and expensive products. At Sector Spiders, we recognize the need for lower costs, more clarity, and greater focus. So we wrote a new chapter for today's investors. Sector Spider ETFs divide the S&P 500 into 10 distinct sectors. You can see exactly what you're investing in with full transparency. Each sector has the diversification of a mutual fund, the flexibility to tailor your investment strategy, the all-day tradability of a stock, and the tracking of an index. Sector Spider ETFs can be used to customize your portfolio allocations, overweight or underweight your sector exposure, and minimize single stock risk. Now it's time to turn the page to a clearer, more focused approach. Sector Spider ETFs, the next chapter in investing. Before investing, consider the fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses. Go to sectorspiders.com for a prospectus containing this information. Read it carefully. Visit us at sectorspiders.com.
All right, she was invited, but she declined. Former Obama security advisor Susan Rice will not be testifying in Washington on what role, if any, the Russians played in the election, and furthermore, the intelligence she might have been gathering on Trump officials who might have been involved. Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton on that. Tom, what do you make of this? I mean, it is rare to decline an invitation to appear before a committee. They could force the issue. Do you think they should?
Well, they always can. They can subpoena her. I guess it was Lindsey Graham invited her, and her excuse was, well, I want to be invited by the Democrat on the committee as well, which is just a silly argument. You know, I would suspect, and I would probably recommend, even as a non-lawyer, that if she were to testify, she'd take the Fifth Amendment. Because there are serious criminal allegations related to the unmasking of these names. If it was done for improper purposes, it could have been in violation of law. And then, of course, you've got the leaks that she could be implicated in, either directly or indirectly. And I don't think she wants to go over there to the Senate next week and start invoking the Fifth Amendment, as would probably be the prudent thing to do, given the calls for a serious criminal investigation of what went on in terms of Obama's spying on the Trump team.
Now, has she ever said outright, or her office acknowledged that, yes, indeed, they did just that? Or because I know there were stories at first where she poo-pooed any role the administration might have had in this, her administration, the Obama administration. But what has she said, or has she ever even acknowledged that this was a direct role she played?
I think she's acknowledged that there were requests for unmasking by her office at the National Security Council. She was National Security Advisor to President Obama, but she said it was all for proper purposes. It wasn't for political purposes. Now, Devin Nunes, the head of the Intelligence Committee, has gone over and looked at the documents and has questions about that. So, and if there are questions about it, then, there are significant other legal ramifications, and then we have the reports this week that there was this radical jump, or the significant jump in the requests for unmaskings. And, again, unmasking is an American citizen is caught up in intelligence intercepts, and obviously the initial intercept may tell you who that citizen is, but typically, unless there's a need to know, no one, that person's privacy is protected. And the concern is that Trump people or Trump advisors or President Trump himself, the Trump team, they were caught up in these intelligence nets, and maybe even members of Congress were, and the Obama administration was using that to not gather intelligence for national security purposes, but for political purposes.
So it's perfectly fine then when Democrats pursuing this story, and both sides say they want to get to the bottom of it, I'll accept on face value they do, but if there's anything that possibly implicates a Democratic high-ranking official, as she was as a national security advisor at the time, no, wouldn't they and shouldn't they, if she's to be taken at her word, as you relayed here, that she wants to be invited by the Democrat or the minority representative on that committee, shouldn't she jump at the point, since they're very hot to trot, to get to the bottom of what happened and how involved the Russians were?
Yeah, you would think. But as I said, I think there are these other issues out there that they're not interested in talking about. And, to escalate it into a subpoena, suggests that these issues are real serious, because if you want to be forthcoming, you want to get the information out, you don't have any other fear of any prosecutions, it stands to reason you accept an invitation short of a subpoena. And the fact that this is not happening speaks volume. I just don't think they're just trying to be difficult. I just think there are some legal issues that are going to prevent her from testifying, and it would be kind of a nightmare, I think, for the Obama team if his national security advisor was forced to do a situation where she's testifying before Congress and invoking the Fifth Amendment.
Or that we found unequivocal proof that the president indeed was given a heads up, presumably from the FBI director, that there was some role there that they wanted to lay low on.
Yeah, or maybe there is no Fifth Amendment concern and she has to testify and detail some questions that would, again, further detract from the left-wing effort to destroy President Trump and put the focus on illicit activities by President Obama and his top people.
Yeah, be careful what you ask for. You just might find out. Tom Fitton, Judicial Watch. President, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We're big elections in France over the weekend, but where is the love there? This is getting horrible.
Quand il me prend dans ses bras, qu'il me parle tout bas, je vois la vie en rose. Il me dit non, rien de rien, non, je ne regrette rien.
Yes, the French election this weekend. It is a 3-day weekend there. And I know what you're thinking, Neil. Your French accent is horrible. You should hear Ashley Webster, who joins us now out of Paris. Ashley, is the pressure on?
Well, what, for your accents? So you've been worse in your Scottish accent, Neil. That was dreadful. Anyway, listen, this is an interesting situation for the French political scene. As we know, the two candidates, Emmanuel Macron, a centrist candidate, and Marine Le Pen, the extreme right candidate, whoever wins, it will mark a new era in French politics because the mainstream parties, the socialists and the Republicans, are not even in the running. But what's really interesting, and perhaps very French, you could say, is that a growing number of voters here don't like either of the candidates who they'll be voting on on Sunday, and we understand as many as 25% of the electorate could vote blanc or white. What does that mean? They vote for neither of the candidates. It's almost a protest, if you like, which means that the voter turnout could be low, which could help Marine Le Pen. But Neil, we've seen protests already over the two candidates without the result even being known, so I guess that also could be considered very French. We've had a banner unfurled on the Eiffel Tower this morning that was against Marine Le Pen. As a result, 12 people were arrested. So now we know the age-old question, how many people does it take to hang a banner on the Eiffel Tower? The answer is 12. What happens on Sunday? I think certainly the favorite is Macron. He has a big lead in the polls, Neil, but I think we're going to see a lot of protests on the street and a lot of unhappy people. But that's the way it is. These two candidates were the ones that won the first round of the elections, and like it or not, one of them, and it appears Mr. Macron, will be the next president of France.
Did it make any difference with President Obama formally endorsing Macron? That was not a mystery, of course, but he inserted himself as he did in the Brexit vote.
It does, Neil. He's also gotten the support of all these EU ministers. But don't forget, France is kind of fed up with what they would consider the establishment, and that's the appeal of Marine Le Pen. All these elitists in Paris drinking their double espressos and cafe lattes and not really concerned about those people outside of the big cities. Sound like someone else we know? The Donald Trump crowd, those
Indeed.
people, the low-paid workers who feel like they're being ignored. So yes, President Obama certainly could, former President Obama certainly could maybe help Macron, but I don't think he's going to convince those that don't particularly care for the French elite.
All right, which is why we sent you to Paris and not, let's say, Charlie Gasparino. Could you imagine? Here I am in Paris, bada bing. All right, thank you very much, Ashley Webster. So remember, all this weekend, that is going to be riveting. A lot of people were on it. Hope you stay with us. In the meantime, Delta is now offering compensation to a family kicked off a flight over seat issues. This one you won't believe.
You and your wife will be in jail and your kids.